So, that's a picture. My fault. I don't even know what the button is, y'all. I'm over here trying to record two things at the same time. Please forgive me for... Oh, found it. There you go. So, this episode is about dissociative identities, right? Because I told you guys that I had DID, and this is really just about that, really, and how I dealt with that, and how, well, honestly, I didn't really think that I would be able to talk about this. I thought that when I first started this channel that I wouldn't be able to talk about it because I figured and thought I would always have to deal with it. So the whole premise of dissociative identity disorder, or even just, false identities, is you are living that and you aren't really sharing it, or you're not aware of it. So I didn't think I could share about it because I was living in it, and now I'm not, thank God. And here we are. So I wrote down, I had 27 in total, and all of them were, I might need a diagram for this. But, so for each personality, it's like they all had different, like, ways they saw, like, I say saw, but like, there was like a mental space where they all were, and then they all saw the identities separately. So like for me, I saw it as like, those are people that are in my head, and I'm not them, and they're not me, and I didn't bring them there, and they're just there because I was abused and I needed a way to cope, and that's how I coped, to be able to survive the situation I was in. And I don't need that anymore, which is why they went away, as well as they also ended up working on stuff when I worked on stuff, so they end up disappearing, which is what they're supposed to do. But when you're in it, you don't really see like that happening because you want them to stay. It's like you become codependent in your toxicity, because it is toxic. It's not really you. It's false identities that were created. And there were some that were aware that there was alters, but then there was some that completely just thought they were like the real me, and they weren't. And during that time, I struggled a lot with finding my identity, as well as keeping track of my own mental space. Like, I was very fatigued. I couldn't remember stuff. I would get lost. I would buy stuff and not remember that I bought it. Sometimes I had relationships, and other personalities would break up with the person I was dating. And if you ask me like what my favorite color is, I couldn't tell you, and it wouldn't be consistent because I might be a different personality, and they all had different style choices, and they all had some of them had different sexual identities, and some of them had it was a lot of confusion and a lot of, I'm trying to get somewhere, but I can't be directed because I have too many options and too many voices in my head. Like, they talked to each other, they talked with me. They didn't talk with me, but they knew, like, well, I'll just start. Anyway, so I had a couple kids, a couple of adults, and some that were considered grandparents, and I'll try to explain this in a way that's like not confusing as much as I can, but it is what it is. So I had three children that were in my mind. They were all 3 years old. They were called the triplets. They were called BEM as an acronym because of their names spelled BEM. So they called, like, the other personalities would call them BEM, or they call them the triplets. And they would mostly come out when I was excited or I was going to a playground. They actually did go to playgrounds. Imagine me as a full grown adult just literally on a playground and climbing playgrounds, usually at night, because I was homeless at the time. And I would go on playgrounds and I would play on the playground as if I was 3. Because honestly, I think that I didn't go to playgrounds that much when I was a kid, and I never really went outside. So I think that's where they developed. And they also had where they remembered some of the trauma that happened when I was a kid. So they developed from that, and it was a boy and 2 girls, and they all protected each other, and they were like a system together. So they were the triplets, and they were 3 years old. And they also would come out when I would have like ice cream. They would also talk amongst some of the other personalities, like Perry and Nova, who I'll talk about later. They were like their parents, and they would like guide them and talk to them and try to keep them calm within the system to like not come out at the inappropriate times. And then I had a personality named 4, whose was like the number 4, and they got their name from the Divergent series, because his name was 4 and he only had 4 fears. So she apparently really enjoyed that and thought that was important and named herself 4. She remembered all the trauma from when we were 4 and we were being abused, and she was a protector of like the whole system. So like when I got very sick or I would have like a complete mental breakdown, 4 would come and she would just be there and not talk and just like kind of like sit in the emotion of like the trauma and not really have a reaction, but just be like, I'm strong, I'm the protector. She was 4 years old. And she also, she wasn't really connected to the triplets, and she wasn't really connected to anybody. I think her and Everly had some conversations, but that wasn't really until much later when my DID or dissociation started disappearing. And then also one of the triplets was a boy, and then when they started dealing with like the gender issues, it changed into a girl. So then it was 3 girls instead of just the 2. And then the next age I had a personality called Marina, who was 12, and everyone called her the fashionista. And so yeah, the Marina, which came from Zig and Sharko. Her name came from Zig and Sharko, the cartoon. Even though Marina was awful, if you think about it, but not that personality, but like the cartoon Marina. But they called her fashionista in the system because honestly, they didn't really talk with each other's actual names. They just thought it was easier to have nicknames, especially the one that was called Mama E, previously Mose, would nickname people and have conversations with people through like cryptic codes to re-jog people's memories because it was easier than having a conversation, especially when they couldn't remember a lot of stuff. But anyway, her name was Fashionista in the system, and then her name was Marina, and she liked fashion, and she had a desire to make clothes. So, again, she was 12, so it was very, like, it was very childlike, her mindset, and she just wanted to make clothes and be, like, a girly girl and be adorable, you know? Like, she read little books um, like the Babysitter's Club, and she just literally was 12. Like, if you can imagine, like, an innocent 12-year-old that just doesn't remember anything that ever was bad, that's how she was. She didn't really remember trauma, and she wasn't really connected to anybody, so she was like she didn't come out that much, and she didn't talk that much either, except in the system. So, yeah. And then there was one that was called Adriana. I don't know where the name comes from. I think she just literally liked the name Adriana. But previously, before that, her name was Fox. And because foxes are known as being sly and sneaky, and in the system, she was known to leak information outside of myself, and she was also a physical protector sometimes, so she could, um, fight people if she had to fight people. And I think Alex at that time, who was like the Google information person, thought that they were either an age slider from like 14 to like 27. But I don't know. It's simply, I wasn't involved that much. I wasn't outside looking at the inside of my brain, if that makes sense. I wasn't in the system. I was just outside of it because it wasn't actually me. So I knew a lot of what they were doing, and I would intervene, but I wasn't involved. And even I saw someone that said that, like, disassociation is like spirits, and I do agree with that. It's like a spiritual pull apart from what you actually are as a person. And then I had Alice, who was 14, which she was based off of Alice in Wonderland, which is why her name is Alice. And her main thing was she would think and feel that none of this is real. So she dealt with severe dissociation, derealization, and she was an emotional protector. So obviously, because of the abuse I suffered, that's kind of necessary if you want to live in a situation that you can't get out of, and you need someone to just be like, this is not real, none of this is happening. There you go. She was 14, and she remembered everything that was happening around the time I was 14, which is around the time after I was being prostituted. So, I mean, it's also interesting because just because they were certain ages doesn't mean that they actually correlate to the age I actually was. Only some of them did. And she was close to Everly at the end, and she was close to Rose because her and Rose, her name was Rube Rose, and they also dealt with a lot of the abuse that I went through, and it helped them to know each other. So they ended up knowing each other later on, and they helped work through a lot of the trauma that they all went through together to also help me to be my actual self. And then I had Ashlyn later on, who was previously Alex. Alex was a dude at first, and once the system dealt with a lot of the gender issues, they also ended up becoming a girl, and Their name was Ashlyn. Everyone called them Google, especially Mama E, who was previously Mose, and they were an emotional protector. It helped with memory and helped with connections and gatekeepers. So, for example, in the system, I think sometimes there's usually like one person or a couple people, depending how large people's systems are, and that help other ones that are gatekeepers, which means that there's personalities that were allowed information and there was personalities that weren't, and this person was in charge of that, and they helped. Like if this personality had an experience, Alex would allow those two people to connect and have a conversation so that they could like grow and learn and put pieces together. So Alex is really one of the reasons I ended up in therapy. And oh yeah, and Fox is also one of the reasons that I ended up telling a lot of people a lot of stuff about what my dad did, and also helped when I had to talk to the police about the abuse I suffered, which I tried to do I think 3 times, and nobody was persecuted, so that's what it is. But yeah, Alex helped is also like a therapist as well. So with being an emotional protector, if somebody had like a breakdown and they needed help or a panic attack, they would talk to Ashlyn, and that helped. And there, I wrote in my notes that they also stayed in the hallway, which means they're kind of like in between everybody. They weren't really like alone. They were interconnected with everybody, which isn't common in a system. And then these are the fact that this is even a thing is crazy to me. But there was 2 people that were connected. It was Evelyn and Rube Rose. So Everly was 28, even though I wasn't even 28 when I was dealing with this stuff. But anyway, previously a protector, Everly was previously a persecutor, and then physical protector and emotional protector, eventually later, after they became a persecutor. Well, after they were a persecutor. So like in your system, sometimes there's usually like a figure that's in the system that everyone considers like extremely scary, and they don't want to be around them, they don't want to talk to them, they are like alone, and they are the person in the system that basically carries the toxic systems that you were born into. They become a part of your mental space, and that's who Everly was in the beginning. And it got to the point where she was trying to bring us back into the environment that I was born to, like my family environment, and I had to step in and be like, yeah, absolutely not. We're not doing that. And Everly also was cruel to a lot of the other personalities, and honestly was monitored after, well, very similar to my father. So when she started becoming more volatile towards other people in the system and treating just people awfully, I stepped in, and she basically was shut down, and she did a lot of therapy and dealt with a lot of the aggression that she felt, rightfully so, but learned how to process it better and became eventually very close to Rube Rose, who she was bullying and treating poorly and talking down to, very similar to how my dad talked to me, by calling me a HO and other stuff while literally abusing me, which makes no sense. And I would say Everly and Rube Rose had a relationship at first that was very similar to my dad's relationship to me. And Rube Rose was who everyone called the bumblebee or flower child. And then loves nature, was an emotional protector, emotional manipulator of men, and also she seduced people. So I think now that I read this, actually, that Rube Rose and Everly were the personalities that my dad wanted me to be. I think he wanted me to be a prostitute. I think he wanted me to be very sexual towards men. And I think he wanted me to be a person that was emotionally manipulative, because I was at that time. And love men and women, honestly. I was pretty manipulative to everybody. I didn't really care because that's what I grew up with. So it didn't seem like it was wrong. So that's what Rube Rose did. And she loved nature. If we were like in a park or seeing bees, she would be like, yay, I love that. And then Everly would be, calling her HO, telling her how awful she is and all this other stuff. And then, but eventually, they became very close. And then I realized also that Everly was the person that was fighting for Rube Rose, because Rube Rose dealt with a lot of the violent, no, a lot of the, let me say that back. Everly dealt with a lot of the violent sexual offenders, and Rube Rose dealt with a lot of the shy, easily manipulated men that I dealt with when I was being abused. So that's where their connection was, and they ended up being best friends when they disappeared. Also, if you notice me sighing, that's also kind of how I relax, so it helps me. Anyway, Perry. Oh, Perry. So, like when I talk about this, I don't really feel emotionally connected to these things, but I feel like what they felt when they were in the system, because I wasn't really in it. I don't have a personal relationship to these things because they weren't me. I didn't like them. I didn't enjoy them. I was confused majority of the time. I literally found notebooks of myself writing to myself to tell me who I am and what I actually believed and thought, because I was so discombobulated and so emotionally drained by having DID, and physically drained. I am happy they're gone. I don't want them back. But I can also appreciate that why they were there, and also that honestly, if I probably didn't have an emotionally and physically and sexually abusive family, I probably would have never had these. But that's not what happened. And because it did happen, I can also tell you guys about it and have deliverance and an understanding of people that are different from me, which I do appreciate, because I can sympathize more and I can be just kind, because they had to work together and they learned to work together, and I got to observe from an internal perspective. Anyway, so Perry, Rube Rose was 34 to 35 and Everly was 28. And then Perry was in her 30s. Alex thought she was 37, and Nova was in her 30s, and Alex thought she was 42. So Perry was the mother of the group. She was actually who my mom pretended to be. And Perry actually the name Perry comes from The Secret of Wings, from the Tinkerbell series. Perry's Tinkerbell sister. So that's where Perry got her name from. And pretty much all the younger kids and the people that weren't really mixed with anybody was Perry's mom. So the triplets, the 4-year-old Perry tried to be her mom, but she didn't want a mom. Molly, who was previously Eddie, a lot of the younger ones, Perry was their mother, but specifically she was very close to Molly, who was previously Eddie, and Nova, who she was constantly matched with. So at that time, they kind of like were modeled after yin and yang, and it's like they would have a very aggressive personality and then a very soft personality to like compensate for that one. So like if Everly came out, Rube Rose would come out soon after or with her. And then with Perry, Perry and Nova were kind of like team tagging the world. But Perry was, the mother of the group, and she kept us physically safe. She had a lot of internal conversations with like the kids and the teenagers, and specifically Eddie, because Eddie liked to skateboard and do like a lot of, I don't know, like physically demanding things that like sporty and stuff. But anyway, she would keep him safe, and well, first it was a dude and then it was a girl, but she would keep her safe, and she would tell him like, hey, don't go down that hill, that's not good, that is unsafe. So that's what Perry was for, and she just talked mostly internally to Nova and the kids and to Molly, who was previously Eddie. And then Nova was like Perry was actually the mother that my mom pretended to be in public. My mom pretended that she was kind and funny and sweet and protective, and I got none of that. So I needed that when I was a kid, so my mom made that up, and that's where Perry came from. And then Nova was, according to Mama E, was Stop Saying My Name and EDM Baby. That's her nickname within the system. And then she liked partying, she liked fun, she was motherly, she was disciplined for the kids, and a verbal protector. So like if you came into my face and you were like, I'm gonna beat you up, she would like sprout, all those things that needed to be said to protect us verbally, and be very rowdy if she needed to be rowdy. And then she listened to EDM. I still have some of the playlists that they made. I don't know, like probably 6 months before they disappeared, they started making playlists in my YouTube of the music they liked. Nova liked EDM, Perry liked country, and more like folk music, which is actually what my mom used to listen to a lot, and I actually still do enjoy because that's what I grew up on. Everly liked metal, Rube Rose. I'm pretty sure you know where that name comes from, but we're gonna leave that alone. But Rube Rose liked a lot of Afro beats and reggaeton, and then the kids liked Elsa, Anna. They liked cartoons. They definitely were allowed to watch kid shows with Perry periodically because they never shut up, honestly. Like, it annoyed me so much. They would be like, Mom, and I'm like, shut up. Like, we don't have a mother. But I understood, and like the other personalities understood that like they wanted a mom and they just didn't have one, so that was like in the system that they just would not be quiet about it. And it was constant talking and conversations in my head that I'm not a part of and that I'm not even co-signing, and it's just there. So understand that it's like 27 different people talking to each other and amongst each other, and you're not in it, and that's annoying, and it's loud. And now I have my own peace and I can hear God clearly. I could hear God then too, but I couldn't hear him as well as I do now. So yeah, they annoyed me. And I think that a lot of people don't understand that. I did watch Moon Knight when I had DID too, or dissociation or whatever. I liked it, and I thought it was very accurate to the experiences I had. But again, I didn't also have to chain myself to a bed, which is great. Anyway, Mose Mama E was previously Mose, and Mose was a guy, and he was named after the office guy on Mose that used to run away. What am I being called? Hold on.